Hey everyone, Britt from Kitchen Table Commander here. I'm bringing you another top 10 commander video. This time we cover the top 10 mono blue commanders. I'll be using stats from edhrec.com but giving you my take on the deck as usual. Before we get going, I want to remind you to subscribe if you haven't already and hit the notification bell so you know the second we release a new video. Oh, also if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button and share it with your friends on social media. With that out of the way, let's get into this list. Before we get into the top 10, I should give an honorable mention to Jalira, Master Polymorphist. 3 and a blue for a 2/2 isn't great, but she can cheat huge creatures into play. Pay 2 and a blue, tap her and sacrifice another creature, and you can put creatures like Inkwell Leviathan, Stormtide Leviathan, or Scourge of Fleets into play. Sacrificing a creature doesn't sound great, but with Nuisance Engine or Thopter Spy Network, it's not hard to have creatures you are more than willing to sacrifice. Moving on. Number 10, Muzzio, Visionary Architect. Muzzio is a 1/3 human artificer for 1 and 2 blue. For 3 and a blue and tap him, look at the top X cards of your library where X is the highest CMC of artifacts you control, and put an artifact from among them onto the battlefield. This commander typically includes creatures like Memnarch, Wormcoil Engine, and Ancient Stone Idol. Memnarch is great in this deck because it gives you the ability to take anything your opponents have for yourself, potentially giving you a higher CMC to use for Muzzio's ability. Having cards like Darksteel Forge to keep all your artifacts safe, while Meteor Golem destroys non-land permanents your opponents control. Mirrorworks makes copies of any non-token artifact you play with Muzzio, while Unwinding Clock gives all your artifacts pseudo-vigilance. Like Jalira, this deck is all about cheating big things into play and taking advantage of any enter the battlefield triggers. Number 9, Jace Vryn's Prodigy. Jace is a 0/2 human wizard for 1 and a blue. Tap him to draw a card and then discard a card. If there are 5 or more cards in your graveyard, exile him and then return him transformed into Jace Telepath Unbound. This commander is all about card draw and fixing the top of your library, so to that end, it includes cards like Brainstorm, Impulse, Ponder, and Sensei's Divining Top. Want a little intel on your opponent's plans? No problem, we've got Gitaxian Probe. This deck also includes Snapcaster Mage because what's better than casting a spell? Casting it a second time. Don't worry, we aren't forgoing counter and bounce spells in favor of card draw, we are a blue deck after all. Number 8, Braids Conjurer Adept. Braids is a 2/2 human wizard for 2 and 2 blue. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, they may put an artifact, creature, or land from their hand onto the battlefield. On the surface, it seems almost too fair. You're helping your opponent ramp and build their board state, but there's the trick. Your opponents aren't expecting to cheat permanents onto the battlefield, so they don't have all the big crazy spells that you do. Creatures like Nezahal Primal Tide, Phyrexian Jester, Stormtide Leviathan, It That Betrays, Pathraiser of Ulamog, and Void Winnower. Why bother putting in small cheap creatures when all you want to do is put down 11/11s for free? In Magical Christmas Land, you'll have Pathraiser of Ulamog down on turn 5, then dropping It That Betrays on turn 6. Swing in with a Pathraiser and take control over the 3 permanents your opponents were forced to sacrifice. Sorry, I was somewhere else for a second there. What was I saying? Number 7, Arcum Dagsson. Arcum is a 2/2 human artificer for 3 and a blue. Tap Arcum Dagsson, and target artifact creature's controller sacrifices it. That player may search their library for a non-creature artifact, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle their library. This deck is filled with creatures that either ramp like Ethereum Sculptor and Silvermere, or can be sacrificed for value, like Hangerback Walker and Mirror Retriever. Throw in Darksteel Forge to make all your artifacts indestructible, and Mirror Turbine to keep making mirror you can sacrifice, or search up another mirror from your deck. Want a way to get rid of your opponent's creatures? Sure you do. Well, this deck includes Mycosynth to make all your creatures artifacts that can be targeted by Arcum's ability. Force them to sacrifice it, and what are they going to get? A Clue Stone? Maybe a Soul Ring? Seems like a fair trade-off to me. Number 6, Memnarch. Memnarch is a 4/5 artifact creature wizard for 7 generic mana. Memnarch has 2 abilities. For 1 and 2 blue, target permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. And for 3 and a blue, gain control of target artifact. The strategy here is clear. Make all your opponent's permanents into artifacts, if they aren't already, and then take them. They thought it was good enough to include in their deck, so why wouldn't you want it? Just like our previous commander, we've got ramp creatures in the form of Ethereum Sculptor and Foundry Inspector. Shimmer Mirror makes opponents' attacks awkward by giving all our artifacts flash. Mycosynth makes all permanents artifacts to give us more options on what to take from our opponents, and at the same time takes away protection from any color by making all cards not on the battlefield, spells, and permanents colorless. Think artifacts are a bit fragile? Don't worry, this deck also runs Darksteel Forge and Padim Console of Innovation to keep everything nice and safe. If all of that weren't enough, this deck also includes Unwinding Clock to give literally everything you control pseudo-vigilance. Number 5, Thassa, God of the Sea. Thassa is a 5/5 legendary enchantment creature god for 2 and a blue. She is indestructible, and as long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, she isn't a creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. And for 1 and a blue, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. How do you take advantage of the unblockable ability? By putting nothing but big creatures in this Seafood deck. This is basically the blue version of Stompy. Creatures like Deep Sea Kraken, Lorthos the Tidemaker, Storm Surge Kraken, Stormtide Leviathan, and Tromokratus. Seems like a high mana curve, doesn't it? That's fine because you won't be casting these normally anyway. Quest for Ula's Temple on turn 1 means you'll be able to put any of these creatures onto the battlefield by turn 4. Including Bident of Thassa means you'll be drawing cards to refill your hand and get more of your big unblockable army onto the battlefield. Number 4, Teferi, Temporal Archmage. Teferi is a 5 loyalty planeswalker for 4 and 2 blue. His +1 ability is look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one in your hand and the other on the bottom of your library. His -1 ability is untap up to 4 target permanents, and his ultimate -10 ability is you get an emblem with you may activate loyalty abilities of planeswalkers you control on any player's turn anytime you can cast an instant. And obviously he can be your commander. At first glance, Teferi doesn't seem too interesting, but then you realize just how many cards care about tapping and untapping. Yes, this deck runs Winter Orb, Static Orb, and Stasis to really slow your opponents down. But you're cool though, because you've got Voltaic Key and Tezzeret the Seeker to untap your artifacts. Artifacts such as Mana Vault and the Chain Veil. The Chain Veil gives us the ability to use each Planeswalker's abilities an extra time each turn, and you're going to want to do that every turn. Speaking of Planeswalkers, this deck also includes Ugin the Spirit Dragon to annoy your opponents and vomit cards. Cursed Totem stops players from activating abilities of creatures. Fortunately, this deck doesn't really have any of those. What it does have are creatures like Frost Titan and Lorthos the Tidemaker to tap down more of your opponent's permanents when they attack, with Frost Titan also tapping down when it enters the battlefield. If you like having friends, don't play this deck. Number 3, Baral, Chief of Compliance. Baral is a 1/3 human wizard for 1 and a blue. He makes your instant and sorcery spells 1 generic mana cheaper to cast, and whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So you can probably guess the theme of this deck. Mono Nope. I mean, there are some creatures in this deck, like Sphinx of the Final Word, to stop your opponents from noping your nope. Counter spells and bounce are the main focus of this deck. Desertion, Dismiss, Rewind, and Unwind all get the point across, with Rewind and Unwind essentially being free spells. Capsize with Buyback and the ever-annoying Cyclonic Rift are here to annoy your opponents by getting rid of anything that might keep your opponents in a position to attack. This deck is kind of a jerk. It seems like the main goal isn't really to kill your opponents so much as to make them scoop. As with the previous commander, you will lose friends if you play this deck, so don't. Number 2, Azami, Lady of Scrolls. Azami is a 0/2 human wizard for 2 and 3 blue. Her ability lets you tap an untapped wizard you control to draw a card. That's it. But that's fine since we're wizard tribal. Creatures like Stonybrook Banneret to make our wizards cheaper to cast. Galecaster Colossus to bounce a non-land permanent you don't control. Patron Wizard to counter spells unless its controller pays an additional generic mana. This deck includes our number 3 commander Baral, Chief of Compliance to make instants and sorceries cheaper. And of course Laboratory Maniac as our win con. I mean, I guess you could attack. Riptide Laboratory helps keep our wizard safe by giving you the ability to bounce a wizard back to your hand for 1 and a blue and tap it. Paradox Engine gives us access to extra card draw by untapping all those tapped wizards just by casting any spell. And we don't just have one way of untapping wizards, because this deck includes cards like Dramatic Reversal to give us options if our opponents decide to take out the engine. Number 1, Talrand, Sky Summoner. Talrand is a 2/2 for 2 and 2 blue that whenever you cast an instant or sorcery creates a 2/2 blue drake with flying. Of course, this deck includes Jace's Sanctum, Primal Amulet, and our good friend Baral to make instants and sorceries cheaper. Once you flip the amulet, it becomes a land that adds 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and then if it's used to cast an instant or sorcery, it lets you copy it and choose new targets if appropriate. Jace's Sanctum also gives you added benefit by letting you scry each time you cast an instant or sorcery. Drake tokens are great, but we've also got Metallurgic Summonings to make XX Construct tokens where X is equal to that spell's CMC. The Summonings also has the added bonus of being able to return all instant and sorcery cards from your graveyard to your hand if you control 6 or more artifacts. This deck needs cards in your hand to really get going, so we've included Opt to scry, making sure you get the card you need and then drawing a card. Think Twice gives you more card draw since you can do it again with Flashback. And finally, cards like Telling Time and Anticipate to look at the top 3 cards of your library and put 1 into your hand, and in the case of Telling Time, 1 on top of your library, and the others on the bottom of your library. Honestly, compared to Baral and Teferi, Talrand seems far more fair to play against. Well, that about does it for today, guys. What did you think about these commanders? Are you thinking of building any of these decks after seeing this video? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video and you want to see more, you can help out the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. You can also hit the notification bell to make sure you stay up to date with all of our content. If you want to help in other ways, you can follow the link in the description to the Kitchen Table Commander Patreon. As a reminder, I've started a new channel to upload all my Twitch streams as they are mostly non-MTG content. If you're interested in watching me play video games badly, go check out Kitchen Table Games. I'll leave a link in the description. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Kitchen Table Command and on Instagram at Kitchen Table Commander. It's been a blast, and I'll see you in the next video.